Hello my friends and welcome back to another Baldur's Gate 3 build guide. Hope you're all doing well. I'm very excited to bring you this build because this is the single most requested build video since I started doing these guides. Today, of course, we're going over my pick for the best Paladin build in Baldur's Gate 3 using Minthara as the example character. The reason I think that this is so heavily requested is twofold. The first reason is that, according to Larian statistics, Paladin is the most popular main character. And so if you're playing a Paladin, you're in great company. The second reason is that I think that of the 12 base classes, Paladin is actually the most difficult to build. The reason for that is that while Paladins have some incredible strengths, they also have some pretty restrictive requirements in order to get the most out of the character. In order to cover that appropriately, I'm going to structure this build guide a little bit different than I have some of the previous ones. And we're going to talk about what the goals are that we need to hit in order to maximize our Paladin before we start building the character. Let me know if you think that this structure actually makes more sense for builds going in forward. I'm interested to see what you have to say. So, Paladins have two main strengths. The first one is that they are the highest damage character in the game, by a quite wide margin, at least in terms of the base classes. There's of course some broken combos and stuff that you can use with other classes to get higher damage, but by default Paladins will do the most damage and specifically the most burst damage. The second is that they give your whole team a bunch of really powerful buffs, most notably that they increase your saving throws, which is incredibly powerful. They have another advantage, especially the Oath of Vengeance Paladin, in that they're very self-sufficient. You don't really need a lot of team support in order to make your Paladin powerful. These advantages come with some corresponding disadvantages. One is that you don't work outside of melee. You're forced to be a melee character because your smite attacks, where all of your damage comes from, are required to be melee. The second is that you are basically forced, because of a class feature that we'll talk about in later on down the line, to use a two-handed weapon. That means that you're going to be a melee character with, for a melee character, relatively low AC, and so you're going to take hits a lot. And because you want to be concentrating on a spell all the time, taking hits means that you will sometimes lose concentration on your spells, which can be very punishing, especially with the spell that we want to mostly be concentrating on. Thirdly, you are extremely multi-attribute dependent, or MAD. What this means is that Paladins basically want 5 of the 6 stats as high as they can possibly get them. You need Strength because you are a melee character trying to hit other enemies in melee. You need Dexterity for Initiative. You need Constitution because you're a character in Dungeons & Dragons, which means that you're going to be taking damage, and you need hit points to survive that. But even more so, you're a melee character, and you're a melee character who wants to be concentrating on spells. Concentration checks are based on your Constitution saves, so you need those as high as possible to not lose concentration. You need Wisdom because it's just an important saving throw, and you need Charisma very badly because it increases all of your saving throws, and I just talked about how important those are overall, as well as being your spellcasting stat and triggering a lot of your class features. Needing 5 of the 6 attributes all pretty high is a pretty serious build restriction. Finally, you need to hit at least 9 levels of Paladin in order to unlock your 3rd level spells, which are where Paladins, especially, again, Oath of Vengeance Paladins, which, spoilers, that's what we're doing, get a lot of their power from. But Paladin, by default, only reaches 6th level caster, because you only get a caster level every 2nd Paladin level, meaning you only get 3rd level spells. Your smite damage is based on the spell slot that you use to smite with. So when you smite an enemy, you spend a spell slot and you do bonus damage based on the slot. Level 1, it's 2d8, level 2, it's 3d8, level 3, it's 4d8, but if you have a 4th level spell slot, you can get 5d8. Obviously, we want to be able to do that because that's an incredible amount of damage. 5d8 is better than just about any other form of damage, and on a critical hit where you double it, it's the same as a Chain Lightning, a level 6 spell. which means that we are highly incentivized to take at least 2 levels of another spellcasting class, so that we can reach 5th level casting from 10 Paladin levels, and 7th level casting by adding 2 more levels from a full casting class. I know that's a little confusing because we're doing like levels and spell levels and caster levels all at once, but bear with me, it'll make sense as we go. So, putting that all together, we have a character that wants to be in melee, needs a lot of different stats, needs at least a couple levels, but not too many in a lot of classes. And so, in order to maximize Paladin, there's a fairly narrow build path that I think is correct to follow. For Minthara specifically, you get a couple other advantages, because Minthara is actually the most mechanically powerful character in the game. Because she comes with an extremely powerful bonus action that makes her an excellent Paladin. She also gets a bunch of Illithid powers unlocked, and one of the cool things about Paladins in Baldur's Gate is that they are the best class to use Illithid powers in the game, because there's a couple that synergize extremely well with what you want to be doing. When you get Minthara, she's probably going to be about level 6, because you get her sometime in Act 2, but this build actually won't change in order between starting at level 6 or starting at level 1, so if you're building this for a main character, you'll follow exactly the same build path. Minthara as a drow is, I think, actually one of the best races for Paladin, and the reason for that is that the Drow's Darkness spell, in combination with a certain item, is extremely powerful for Paladins, and indeed for every character, but if you want a different race, then you really can't go wrong. Paladins are pretty independent of racial features, but the usual suspects like Wood Elf for bonus movement speed, or Githyanki for Misty Step are incredibly strong. Dwergar for the bonus enlarge can be useful, or Halfling because it makes it harder for you to lose concentration on your spells, all worth mentioning as being powerful. Alright, so with that out of the way, we know kind of what our goals are for the build. Let's get right into it. So, first off, we are going to start with Paladin and take Oath of Vengeance. Oath of Vengeance, I think, is the best Paladin because it lets you gain advantage against important enemies for an entire combat. Paladins love advantage, because if you critically hit with a smite attack, not only does it double the damage of your weapon, it doubles the damage of your smite dice as well, meaning that Paladins love critical hits more than just about any other class in the game. So any source of advantage doubles the chance of you critically hitting. That's incredibly strong. For our attributes, we have some fairly specific requirements, so we're going to change things around here. We are going to ensure that we get 16 concentration and 16 strength, although I will say that there are some attribute builds that you can do if you're willing to use certain items, and I'll show you a second version of this build after this that make the multi-attribute dependency with Paladins much less punishing, and that will make your character much smoother. Paladins benefit very strongly from taking potions or using the Gloves of Dexterity, so I'll show you versions of those builds based on those items afterwards. But for a default build, this is going to be your stat array. You need Strength in order to hit, you need Constitution in order to live, and you need Charisma in order to cast your spells and boost your saves. For your skill selection, there's nothing in particular that you need except for Athletics. Every Strength character should have Athletics because pushing enemies is very important. And if you're a main character and intending to do dialogue checks, it's very nice to have your dialogue checks. You'll have decent Charisma throughout the game, so I don't mind this. You can also take... really for Minthara, there's nothing else here that matters, so I would just go with her default stat spread. Level 2 Paladin, you get the most important things that Paladin has access to. You get your smites, which allow you to spend your spell slots on extra damage. You're pretty much always going to want to use your spells for damage rather than for the spell effect, but there are a couple spells that I think are worth mentioning as being particularly powerful for Paladins at low levels. One of these, of course, is Bless. Concentrating on Bless is going to increase your chance to hit, which is incredibly strong. You need to cast this ahead of a fight, but it is very useful for you and your allies as well. Another one that really is very useful for Paladins that is surprisingly good, even though it doesn't look that good, is Shield of Faith. you will always want to be concentrating on a spell, and this is one you can cast at the beginning of the day, and as long as you don't lose concentration on it, you'll keep +2 AC for the entire day. Since you're going to be a two-handed weapon user who fights in melee, you'll have lower AC than most other characters, so this is very powerful. You already have healing options, so I don't think you need to take Cure Wounds, and unfortunately, because we have low charisma, relatively low charisma, the ones that allow saving throws are going to be less strong than the other ones. Divine Favor, I think, is not good, even if you aren't Minthara, but is redundant with Minthara's abilities. So I would mostly, at this point, just take the special smites. I think of the two special smites, you want Wrathful Smite and Thunderous Smite, because Prone and Frightened are great conditions. For our fighting style, this is where Paladin's synergies really start to take off. You get Great Weapon Fighting, which allows you, when rolling a 1 or 2 on damage dice for two-handed melee weapons, re-roll the dice. This is any die that you roll as part of a weapon attack, so you guessed it, it includes smite damage. Great Weapon Fighting is mandatory for Paladins because it's going to increase the average damage of your smite attacks enormously, and so that's why we don't use a shield. This also highly incentivizes you to use weapons with multiple small damage dice rather than single large damage dice, so you prefer a greatsword or a maul over a battle axe. Just something to keep in mind when you're picking your weapons. Paladin level 3 for Vengeance Paladin gives you Vow of Enmity. This lets you spend a Channel Oath and a bonus action to gain advantage against a specific enemy, and not only is this incredibly powerful in and of itself, just for hitting on all your attacks, it's super good for Paladins because they love advantage since it generates more critical hits. Also, with single powerful attacks like Paladins do, just hitting on your attacks is really important. You also get Divine Health, which actually in this game comes up a fair amount. Preventing disease from affecting you is kind of interesting. I actually don't know. I think this might prevent you from taking the negatives if Astarion bites you, so that's kind of a fun little bonus. If someone knows how that interacts, let me know in the comments. For your next spell, again, we're steering clear of things like Command that allow for saving throws because our save DCs are not that good, but something like Protection from Good and Evil can come up. Most of the time, past the first few spells, you're spending these spell slots on smites, so which spells you pick doesn't matter particularly. Paladin level 4 gets you your first feat, and so you're going to take Strength. You might think you would want to be boosting Charisma, but you really just want to be hitting as hard as possible and as often as possible, so increasing your strength is really important. At Paladin level 5, we get the most important class feature for any melee character, as well as access to second level spells for our Oath, which means that we get Misty Step, which is maybe the single best spell for a melee character to have. As a bonus action, getting next to enemies is incredibly strong, and you also get extra attack. Even without smites, this lets you double your damage output in a round, so obviously that's incredibly strong, but you can now have insane burst damage if you are willing to use 2 spell slots on your opening round of combat. If you use 2 level 2 spells, that is all of your level 2 spells for the day, but that gives you 2 attacks with an additional 3d8 bonus damage each on your opening round of combat. That's going to kill basically everything at level 5. As a drow, Minthara also gets access to Darkness, which opens up a combo that I'll talk about when we get into items, but most importantly, you're going to want to have your level 2 weapons, your level 2 spell selection. Misty Step is the most important one. I wouldn't worry too much about which ones you prepare for your level 2 spells, because level 2 spells are really going to be spent entirely on smites. But some that can matter, Protection from Poison can come up, so I would usually prepare this just because if you do want it, then it's very good. Like, you'll only cast this when it's excellent, so that's probably the one that matters the most. I think it's probably not worth spending a spell slot on your Paladin on aid. This is something your Cleric should be doing if you have a Cleric, but Paladins need their spell slots for smite. At level 6 Paladin, we get access to our other most important Paladin feature, Aura of Protection. Don't pay attention to the +0 there. This is bugged in the level up screen for whatever reason, but basically this gives you and your allies in a 10-foot aura around you +2 to all of your saving throws. Or plus your charisma bonus to all of your saving throws, which for us is +2 currently, although if you increase your charisma in some way, this goes up. This is an enormous bonus. It's much better than it sounds, because basically this is every saving throw you make throughout the entire game that you are going to have your charisma bonus to. It will double the saving throw bonus for a lot of your allies for many saves, as well as your own for certain things. It also means you're significantly less likely to lose concentration on certain spells, because even though we don't have Constitution save proficiency, we now have +3 Constitution and get to add our charisma to it, so we'll have a +5 bonus to our concentration saves. This means that on minimal damage hits, which make you roll a DC 10 concentration check, you are only 1 in 4 to lose your concentration save on those minimal damage hits, which means that for most of the things that are going to knock concentration off of you, you are much less likely to lose it. This is obviously an extremely powerful class feature, and it's one of the 2 reasons that we're in Paladin. Having gotten our 2 most important Paladin features, or 3 most important Paladin features, between Divine Smite, Extra Attack, and Aura of Protection, we now have a choice to make. We can either try to reach our 3rd level spells faster, by getting to level 9 Paladin as soon as we can, or we can try to reach higher level smites faster by taking our off levels in other casting classes now. At this point, I prefer to take our off levels earlier in order to gain access to higher level smites. As a level 6 Paladin, we're basically a 3rd level spellcaster, which means we need 2 levels in another character class to reach level 3 smites, level 3 spell slots, allowing us to smite at level 3. Which class we are going to choose is... The class that we're going to choose for this should be a charisma class, because that will synergize well with our existing charisma. You could also take Wizard because of an exploit that allows you to get high-level Wizard spells based on your caster level rather than on the level of Wizard that you have. For more on that, you can look at my video, The Real Best Wizard in Baldur's Gate 3, but we're going to be avoiding that for this build. That means that our choice is basically between 2 possible options for increased caster level, Bard and Sorcerer. Of the 2, for one specific reason, I think that Sorcerer is stronger. Oh, wait, actually, sorry, I need to hit Accept for level 6 Paladin before we take Sorcerer. And that reason is, very simply, the spell Shield. We are going to be a fairly low AC melee character, as I've said before, because we're going to be in plate armor but with no shield with 18 AC. The shield spell lets us mitigate that problem. It also gives us a good use for our reaction, which paladins mostly don't have great uses for their reaction, and every character should try to have uses for their reaction. In combat, there are 5 resources that you can use every turn on every character. Those are your action, which paladins have some of the best actions in the game with smite attacks. Your bonus action, paladins have some of the best bonus actions in the game, and Minthara specifically has an excellent one. Your movement, your concentration, which we're always going to be using, and your reaction. Adding shield gives us a second excellent use for our reaction in addition to opportunity attacks, meaning that we have a lot of additional advantages in terms of our action economy. For our second spell, I think you just want a utility spell, again steering clear of things that have save DCs, so I'll probably take Enhanced Leap. And then for your cantrips, you want all of the utility cantrips like Minor Illusion, like Mage Hand, like Friends, that kind of thing. You probably, again, want to steer clear of Firebolt or Ray of Frost, damaging ones, because these will be based on your charisma. This is actually, I know I joke about this a lot, Blade Ward is also really excellent for melee characters as well. This is actually, I know I joke about this a lot, but Paladin is actually one of the few classes that does have some uses for True Strike, because you can cast it ahead of combat to gain advantage, and gaining advantage is very powerful. If you pre-cast this before combat, you get advantage on your first attack roll. Obviously, you can also hide, but sometimes because you're a melee character, you won't be able to hide, and so there is some utility, real utility, to taking True Strike. Like I said, I know I joke about this one a lot, but for this build, there is actually a real use case. Still not incredibly strong, but worth mentioning, because it's rare that a use case for this spell comes up. For our subclass, we're going to go with Storm Sorcery, because this lets you fly as a bonus action. You'll mostly, again, be spending your spell slots on Smites, which unfortunately do not work with Tempestuous Magic, but the special Paladin Smites do work with Tempestuous Magic, and that lets you disengage from combat or reposition more easily. The fact that you... Or, sorry, the special Paladin Smites don't work because they require your bonus action. They would work if you had a second bonus action from something. But the ability to reposition yourself with Tempestuous Magic is still very useful for any melee character, and I think it beats out just the other minor bonuses you get from the other subclasses. Level 2 Sorcerer, we get to upgrade our spell selection a little bit, and you can take something like Expeditious Retreat or Featherfall, both very useful. And you also get access to Twinned Spell, which is going to be incredibly strong because both the Vengeance Paladins get haste, and Twinned Haste is one of the best things that you can do with a turn, and Distant Spell as well, incredibly strong. This also gets us access to level 3 spell slots, because we are now a 5th level spellcaster, having 2 from Sorcerer and 3 from Paladin, meaning that we can smite at level 3 for 4d8 bonus damage starting at level 8. Normally on Paladins you'd have to wait until higher levels in order to access that those higher level smites. At this point, we go back to Paladin. The Relentless Avenger opportunity attack boost is fine. It's not the most incredible thing that you can have, but it's totally free, so it's a nice little bonus. We get our second feat, allowing us to maximize our strength. And at level 9, Paladin, we get access to Haste. Haste, of course, is one of the best spells in the game, and the best spell in the game for a melee character. We can twin it as a sorcerer, meaning that we have the option to haste an ally as well, so Paladins play very well with their team as a result. If you have this concentrated on, you're going to be doing tons of damage at every stage of combat. Incredibly powerful. So we, of course, have that prepared. For your other level 3 spells, the Elemental Weapon is actually quite good. This is... oh no, excuse me, this has concentration, so we'll never use this. For some reason I thought this didn't have concentration. Most of the higher level special smites are not as good at this point because they do lower damage than just using your spell slot for that smite, as well as the save DC is based on your charisma, so enemies are going to succeed a lot. Crusader's Mantle's kind of interesting if you have allies that are multi-attacking a lot, but mostly your level 3 spell slots are going to be used on haste and on smites. Finally, at 12th level, we have a choice between taking level 10 Paladin. This gets you access to Aura of Courage, giving you the ability to prevent allies from being frightened. This is a very powerful effect, and there's actually one fight that in the game that this basically solves all on its own, as well as getting additional lay on hands charges. And this still gets you level 4 spell slots because we would have 5 spell levels from Paladin and 3 from Sorcerer. However, I think that you actually prefer to take your third level in Sorcerer, because this allows you to get Meta Magic Quicken spell, so you can then Quicken Haste. Anytime you don't want to twin it, quickening it is very powerful. But those two options, I think, are somewhat interchangeable. Putting it all together, we have a character that can haste itself, and an ally, does massive burst damage based on smites, and gets access to a bunch of good utility spells from Sorcerer, as well as having great defenses thanks to your Paladin save bonus, as well as shield. I would probably take Darkness if you're going to use one combo that I would like to mention as well. For items, you just need the best heavy armor that you can find and the best two-handed weapon you can find. Ideally one that rolls 2d6, not one that rolls 1d12, to maximize your great weapon mastery. Certain items I think are particularly good on Paladins, though, because Paladins love critical hits so much. Anything that can guarantee a critical hit, like this Killer's Sweetheart Ring, is incredible, because this will allow you to guarantee a smite. As well, anything that increases your AC, like this Cloak of Protection, is very valuable to you because you are, as I've mentioned a few times, lower AC than many other melee builds. Finally, I should mention a couple things that Minthara gets specifically, as opposed to other Paladins, and the first is this Soul Branding bonus action. This gives you 5 feet of bonus movement speed and an additional 3 to 9 damage on your next attack. That's actually 2d4 plus 1, which means it benefits very strongly from critical hits as well as from Great Weapon Fighting. The fighting style. Yes, Great Weapon Fighting, not Great Weapon Master. Really wish they would name those two slightly more differently. Benefits very strongly from those bonuses as well. And this is what makes Minthara the most mechanically powerful character in the game, because she's going to be doing a way more damage on every attack than most other characters at the cost of a bonus action, as well as being able to make herself move faster with this. She also gets access to some Illithid powers, of which the most important is Luck of the Far Realms, because as we talked about, gaining access to guaranteed critical hits is incredibly strong. One thing that you're definitely going to want to do on your Paladin is go to your spellbook here and go to your reactions, and as with every character, you want to set these all on Ask, but most importantly, you want to have Luck of the Far Realms and Divine Smite on all of your Divine Smite on weapon damage set to Ask. This way you can choose whether you're going to use a smite anytime a smite might be useful, rather than having the game decide for you whether or not you're going to use one. There are two choices here, Divine Smite on critical hit and Divine Smite on normal hit. You should just set them both to prompt you every time so you don't forget to use a smite, and don't have to choose in advance whether you're going to use a smite, because one of the advantages of smites is you get to see whether you hit or not before deciding whether to use it or not, or whether the enemy just is going to die to the weapon damage. Finally, I should mention that there are a couple combos and exploits that we can use. So one of these is that if you can cast Darkness and have the Eversight Ring, which unfortunately I wasn't able to dev mode into the save. The save is actually borrowed from my friend Leslie because I didn't have a save with Minthara unlocked available, so shout out to Leslie, and shout out to the people at the Baldur's Gate 3 script extender who made this possible, made modding this save possible. But the Eversight Ring makes you immune to blindness. This counts the blindness from darkness. So if you are a drow and place a darkness cloud, or have an ally, or from your sorcerer levels place a fog cloud, it means that enemies will not be able to shoot you with ranged attacks, they'll have disadvantage on all their melee attacks, and you'll have advantage on all your melee attacks. It's a different use of concentration than haste, but incredibly powerful as well, especially at lower levels, and since you're a drow, it doesn't actually cost you a spell slot. So that one's worth mentioning. Finally, I'm going to show you a build that uses the attributes that increase your, or the items that increase your stats. Because paladins are so multi-attribute dependent, they benefit much more strongly from elixirs or gloves of hill giant strength and the gloves of dexterity. So we can actually make some changes to our build to increase its power level if we're going to use those. Items. The first and most interesting of these is that we get to actually start as a sorcerer. The reason for this is that sorcerers get Constitution save proficiency, and while you can't do that on the default build because multi-classing into Paladin only gives you medium armor proficiency, if you're using the Gloves of Dexterity, medium armor plus the Gloves of Dexterity gives you better AC than heavy armor. If you use one of the medium armors that is uncapped in terms of how much AC you get. So that lets us take attribute spreads, an attribute spread that looks more like this, gaining 14 wisdom, which is really nice, and boosting our charisma up to 16, which gives us incredibly better saving throws. We also get to still have 16 constitution. make the same spell decisions and everything that you would make otherwise. And then we're going to go into Paladin. I'm just going to be speeding through this, but you'll make all the same choices that we made in the last... with the last build. Leveling Paladin as quickly as possible. Oop. Hit the wrong button there. We don't need, but importantly, we don't need an ability improvement because we're going to have 20 strength from our Hill Giant Elixir, which lets us open up a lot of feats. Paladins love feats, but usually can't take them because you so desperately need your attribute improvements. But there's a lot that are incredibly strong for Paladins. The most important of these and most interesting of these is Savage Attacker, because this lets you roll your damage dice twice and use the highest result. Once again, this counts all damage dice. So Minthara's Branding Soul ability and all smite damage gets to re-roll your highest, re-roll your dice and use the highest result. This has some mild negative synergy with Great Weapon Fighting, because you'll roll fewer ones, so the Great Weapon Fighting won't come up as often. But Savage Attacker is going to be, on average, like a 30% increase in your DPS, so this is an incredibly powerful feat that we don't normally get access to. Here we are going to continue to level up. Dip back into Sorcerer, like I said earlier, for doing the same things that we did before. I'll just take the other Sorcerer level now, just for speed. Though you'll want to do it in the same order that we did before as well, where you take the Paladin levels beforehand to get access to another feat. The best feat here is actually Great Weapon Master, to increase our damage even further, although because so much of a Paladin's bonus damage comes from their smite attacks, you are going to get less benefit out of Great Weapon Master than other two-handed weapon users, but it's still an excellent feat that increases your damage output significantly. Some other options are things like Mage Slayer can come up quite a lot. Sentinel is excellent for any melee character, keeping them inside your negative effect, especially if you're going for the Darkness synergy from being a drow. Warcaster, to make it even harder for you to lose concentration, is pretty good, but I think probably I would just go with Great Weapon Master here. At this point, you're really gilding the lily, like this build is already really strong, so you're just getting a lot of additional power on it as well. And then, of course, we would have gotten this level a little sooner, but you take your levels in haste. You get access to haste, capping off the build, and then when you have taken an elixir and are wearing Gloves of Dexterity, you will end up with very good AC if you have one of the armors that allows you to use your full AC with medium armor. Notice that our AC actually increases because we have the Gloves of Dexterity and the medium armor rather than plate armor. Alright, my friends, I hope that you have enjoyed this video, and as always, if you have, then do please let me know what you think in the comments down below. Leave a like on the video, that helps a ton with the algorithm, and you can subscribe to my channel for more of this and other strategy game content. Cheers, my friends, and I'll catch you next time.